Welcome all. So good afternoon, everyone. Today we will be discussing how the ExpandIT solution works for service organizations, and more specifically, how the offline capabilities function in the ExpandIT Field Service software. I believe most of you are familiar with ExpandIT, but for those who don't know, ExpandIT is a Microsoft Dynamics independent software vendor, and we specialize in service management. If I haven't met you already, my name is Julissa Gonzalez. I work on the marketing and business development side at ExpandIT. And I also have Michael Forbata, who is a field service product expert and software developer who will be speaking in a few minutes. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's session. Everyone who registered will get an email with a link to the on-demand version within the next few days. This session will run for around 45 minutes, which includes time for Q&A. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel on your RingCentral console so we can address them towards the end. And if for some reason we don't have time to address all of the questions in today's live event, please be assured that we will follow up with you directly following the webinar. So the agenda is as follows. We'll look at the objectives for the webinar. Next, I'll discuss the key takeaways. Michael will then take over and get into the demo. We have allocated some time for Q&A at the end, and we'll finish off with next steps and additional resources you may use. So what is the main objective of this webinar? The main objective of this webinar is to provide educational training on the offline capabilities in the ExpandIT Field Service software. And during the training, Michael will discuss the offline capabilities on any client device that offers an HTML5 browser, poor and intermittent cell services zones, and mobile user experience, constant updates possible without user interaction, and expanded offline data storage and movement explained. And now I'll hand it off to Michael to get started with the demo.
So good afternoon. Several portions of this demo are going to start off in the slideshow, just because once a client is taken offline, it's enabled. So to just show how the initial portion of it is done, I created the slides that will lead up to it. If you haven't seen the previous webinars on mobile clients, I would ask that you go and look at those just for information about general usage and login. That's not what will be covered in today's presentation. So just like normal, the user starts out logging into the mobile client, and then that's really the start. It's not offline specific, but I just wanted to make sure that we were all starting from the same place. Once they've logged in, they're going to be able to have the availability of this offline enable offline operation. So you may not see this on your mobile client, and then there are several reasons why. So we have to kind of talk about what has to already exist for offline operation to exist. First, for offline operation to exist, our system has to be, which again is browser-based, has to be being accessed through a secure connection. So an HTTPS connection, that connection must again be secure. There's no port requirement, so it could be a non-port 443, but it does have to be through a secure connection. That's the first requirement. And the second requirement is whatever is accessing the system needs to be an HTML5 compliant browser. So examples of HTML5 compliant browsers are Chrome, Safari, the new version of Edge, there are several others out there that offer different levels of HTML5 compliance, but for the most part, they function as expected for this. So the main ones that we see, though, are Chrome and Safari, both because there's a heavy usage of Chrome on laptops or on Apple laptops, Safari, but also because the main browsers for both Android or iOS devices are both Chrome and Safari. So they have to be offline capable, the browser itself. So if the browser itself is offline capable, if the URL is secure, the last piece of information is whether or not you have purchased offline clients. And so that's one of the keys. We have two different licensing types for our clients, what we call a thin client, which is online only, and then the thick or offline capable client. So if you have offline licenses, when you created users, and if you go to the BAS administrative webinar, you can see how to create users. And we covered selecting whether it was a thin or thick client. All right, so as long as the client ID is set to be the thick client, secure connection, HTML5 compliant browser, you will end up with the offline, enable offline operations. You're going to click this. It's going to ask if you are sure that you want to enable offline operations, and then it's going to give you a series of informational messages. It's going to tell you it's downloading its files, and then it's going to tell you it's receiving data. After it's completed, you're going to get this message pop up right here that says synchronization is finished. You have now done the initial synchronization of our product. So one of the things we're going to touch on later is how data is synchronized and what it means. But keep in mind, the very first synchronization is the longest. It would be suggested that it's done on Wi-Fi if you have large amounts of data. It's suggested to be done in office if possible. Subsequent synchronizations do not require that. And we'll go over why when we cover the data here in just a little bit. So this is the initial synchronization that we're looking at here. And now we're going to take a look at the actual product itself. So let's go ahead and switch over to that. Okay. Okay. So now that we have it, I'm going to display this actually as an iPad. So now that we have it, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And it's going to tell me it was forced offline. Communication with the server failed. Please review any error details. And I can try to go online. So I can try online. And it's going to tell me, but I'm going to say okay, and I'm offline. So you can see it lost communication. So it's going to force me offline. You'll notice in the top right-hand side, there's a cloud. Now, when I'm online, that cloud is white and has a check mark box in it. But offline becomes yellow. Now let's talk about the different types of icons and one of the reasons why I switched to show it as an iPad. Here you can see the icon becomes this outlined, thin, small graphic, okay? But it's not thin or small, but the outline is thin and it's orange. So iOS devices, the way our system works is it natively tries to style with the OS that's being used. iOS uses more outlined or thin identifying type icons, whereas say Android and Windows uses fully filled icons. So this same icon on an Android device will show a full orange cloud. There is no difference between the two. It is meant to look more native to the OS in question. So really the big takeaway is this: orange means I am offline. It means I am capable of being offline, and I am offline at that point in time. Okay. Let me go ahead and check to make sure that I'm good. And I'm going to turn this off. Was just online. I don't think I lost communication. So here you can see, now that I go to full screen, the icon is now full size. And it's full size, again, because, it is on Windows. So again, Android and Windows, is going to be full size, okay? On the left-hand side, within the hamburger menu, on any device, you're going to get a status window here. So it's going to tell you last date and time data was received from the server, and it's going to give you your current status. Right now, my current status is offline. You can click this status. It will attempt to send data to synchronize, and then to bring itself back online.
My video share should be coming back up. If Lisa, you can confirm that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, so let's go back to the mobile application. So where we had just left off was talking about the online and offline, and I had left it in the offline state. So I'm going to actually put it back into that offline state so that we can look at that here. Okay, and so now we are offline. So what do we see? So maybe it is best to actually put it back into smaller screen so that we can see the icons in the upper right-hand side during this demo. So let's go back to the iPad view. Okay. In the top right-hand side, we see a hand. And that hand means I'm offline. But why is it a hand instead of a cloud? It's a hand because I, as the user, have taken it offline. It was my own decision. So I, as a user, have gone in and clicked offline. So again, the cloud showing me orange means I have fallen offline. And the cloud may go between being offline to being online. And let's take a look at what online looks like. So if I click on the offline to bring me back to online, I can see that I have a cloud with a check mark in it. So these are the types of communications, and this is how users can actively at any point see what is their current status. Another thing that they can do is, you'll notice, is if I do any type of piece that requires data communication to the server, you're going to quickly see 3 communicating dots in the top right-hand side of the screen. What that means is there's data flowing between us and the server. So is there data flowing? You'll know if you're communicating with the server. Are you online? You'll know if there's a cloud with a check mark in the server. Are you offline? You'll know because there will be a orange cloud on the server. Is there a hand? You'll know that you forced your system offline. So one of the pieces that I wanted to touch on was, well, why would you do that? And we talk a lot with customers who have something such as intermittent cell service. So I, as a mobile user, know that I'm going into an area that has no or intermittent cell service. I may even be planning to put my phone on airplane mode. I actually can come in here. I can take myself offline. And that just means that as I'm working throughout the time frame, it isn't going to constantly try to go on and offline, trying to send back and forth. Now, if it does, the application will work as normal. However, if I just take myself offline, then I know I'm offline. And now it's telling me that server communication with the server failed, so I'm offline anyway. So I'm capable of coming in and actually setting up and doing that offline communication and doing it in that sense. Why is it important to take yourself offline? So let's talk about the different ways we can synchronize data. Oh, I meant to leave this open. And you can see now it's been reestablished, and that's what I was hoping would happen in the background. So what are different ways that we can communicate data to the mobile client? Well, one is by them forcing the synchronization of data, taking themselves offline and taking themselves online. That's going to force that data. When you take yourself offline, the system is going to ask the server, what data don't I have right now? And the server is going to send whatever has changed since the last synchronization. That's why the first synchronization is the largest, because it's everything. There's nothing that has not changed. However, moving forward, it's only going to synchronize what's called the deltas, right? The change of data. And that's the biggest key to our system is that we're not trying to send all the data all the time, just data that we know has changed since the last time you had gone offline. So I can force that data pull down simply by taking the system offline. Now, this is actually doing that synchronization, getting everything ready, figuring out if it needs any data. Now we're offline, and I can operate offline as if I was online. And then when I bring it back online, it'll communicate with the server and update as needed. One of the main things it did when I took it offline was it got all the data that I may have needed to work for the day. So whatever I needed to do work for today, it pulled down. So some businesses will say, well, I'm really just protecting against that falling offline, falling online concept. I don't want to have it so that they have to, take themselves offline to get the data. Well, our system in the background can automatically sync data to the mobile client on a timed basis. So every X number of minutes, the mobile client can check with the server, check for data changes, and synchronize them. That's enabled, that's available, and you can configure the time frame. By default, it's set to 15 minutes, and that seems to be fairly accurate overall and a good representation. And it depends on the scale, the number of users, how many hits against the server configurations. There's a lot of things that go into what may adjust that time. But by default, we have it set for 15 minutes. And so what that means is if data is added in the back end, as long as the user is online, within 15 minutes, it will be available if they fall offline on the mobile client. Within 15 minutes, because it's not necessarily 15 minutes from when the data got added, but it's a timed interval, so it might be in 2 minutes, might be in 12 minutes, but it could be in that full 15. So we have different types of usages. We have that intermittent cell data. We have that taking myself offline and online. And the biggest key is the functionality for the system remains the same. And really, what the users need to pay attention to is where were they? So if I'm a user and I take myself offline, a lot of times people say, and I finish my day and I go home, well, how's the data get back? And of course the answer is, if you don't reopen the application and bring yourself back online when you're within cell service, it won't. It won't until the next time you do that. So there's no way to overcome that. Meaning, if the app isn't open, we can't just get data to send. If the user doesn't tell us that they're ready to come back online because they told us to come offline, then there's no way we can understand to send it. So there is a business process along with the online offline functionality that of course has to be built and defined within any organization of how it will be used. Lastly, I just wanted to touch across those messages across the top. I was hoping that they would come, I would be able to force them now. Let's see if I can bring it back online. But if I'm offline, such as now, and I'm in that intermittent cell data. So if I'm offline and I forced myself offline and then I go offline and come online, it's going to tell me that it is available to come online, but it's not going to force it. It's going to put that notification across the top banner. You don't have to interact with it. You don't have to close it. And it will update as it goes back offline, comes back online, goes back offline, or comes back online. It'll notify that. So the user can kind of make a determination of when they want to bring back online. But again, it was because they forced to go offline. If a user falls offline purely because of cell signal or mobile signal, as soon as they come back online, it will start to resynchronize that data. What they're going to see when they come online again is down here, it's going to push changes up. And it was very quick because we didn't have any. And it's going to see if there were any changes from the server. So even when I come back online, not only is it pushing changes up, but again, it's getting all available changes that I'm going to need. So if I was out of cell service throughout my day, I hit this button, I send my data up. I also get any new scheduled items I may have had, all of the required details for those new scheduled items. Everything gets pulled down to me as well. So I'm able to easily grab that information and pull that down. Okay. All right. So at this point, really, the goal of this was to discuss how offline and online works, the concept of the lost connection of intermittent cell signal, how data actually flows, and that's that key, the full synchronization at the beginning, and then the required file, the required deltas or the changed data only moving forward, how data gets back once you're back online, how a user can force switch off and on, and how a user understands what their current status is, which is, again, identified in the top right-hand corner with the cloud, including server communication, or on the left-hand side here. I think the biggest key, and what gets most people, especially during setup and usage, is what I was trying to discuss with before, which was not seeing that enable offline application. And the key is to be able to enable those three main keys: the HTML5 compliant browser, secure URL, and client enabled for the thick client when you set up your user, your mobile user. So overall, I think that touches on all of it. This webinar is one of the shorter ones, just because it focuses very specifically on this this usage. So the last thing I want to touch on is, which has nothing to do with the usage, but is about what happens in the background. Where's the data stored locally? Well, it's stored in the local application cache. So we're storing it locally on the individual devices, and that's how the storage is set up. So it's using Web SQL right currently, so as a backend. So that's the underlying data store for the data that is being pulled and stored offline. Okay. If your application is modified through our system, we identify the data that also needs to be set up to be available offline. So I just want to touch on that real quick. Not all data that's available online needs to be available offline. So if you have something like that, I'll give you an example. We have one customer who has modified to show purchase orders through a specific screen, but that's not available in offline mode. We actually have a filtering capability to say, here's the data we'll have in online, here's the data we'll available offline. So if you wanted to have common historical data available, but only for the last 6 months, we can filter the offline to have less. Sometimes that's required. If you have millions of rows, tons of data, sometimes it becomes arduous for that synchronization process, to do even the first sync. And it might not be worth it to get the additional data that we could have filtered out and made it easier. Currently, there's no limitation of data other than device size and specs. But there's also the user's patience limitations, which is why you might want to limit the amount of data that had to be synchronized even just the first time. Okay. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll head back over to the slideshow here. And we'll touch on any questions that may have been asked during the webinar.
Yes, thank you, Michael. So right now we don't have any questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them to me afterwards. I will be sharing my contact information shortly. So we can move on to the next slide. And so there are a few additional resources that are available for your use. So as mentioned, we will be distributing the recording afterwards. So you'll be able to go over the training once again and use it as you may like. We do have other educational videos on our official YouTube page, as Michael mentioned, where we go over other products. And we will have other educational webinars in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for those ones as well. As well, if you have any topics that you would like to see covered and we have not done it yet, please feel free to let me know. And with that being said, if you do have additional questions about the material that was covered today, please feel free to contact me. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.